Every February 2nd in a tiny Pennsylvania town, thousands of people brave the pre-dawn cold to watch a groundhog predict the weather. Yep, you heard that right. At Gobbler's Knob in Punxsutawney, a group of distinguished gentlemen in top hats and tuxedos known as the Inner Circle ceremoniously wake up their resident prognosticator, Punxsutawney Phil. The rules are simple. If Phil sees his shadow and retreats into his burrow, we're in for 6 more weeks of winter. No shadow, spring is just around the corner. The tradition dates back to 1887, drawing from German folklore. What started as a small town celebration has grown into a 3-day festival, complete with ice carving, chainsaw art, and the Phil Fest. But this holiday can be a bit polarizing, especially among meteorologists.
I'm a Phil loyalist. He is the prognosticator of all prognosticators. Like, you don't get that title just willy-nilly. Like, they don't give that to anybody, okay? That's all I'm saying.
I mean, it's eroded.
Give Phil a break. He's trying.
Today we are going off the radar with the real-life Phil Connors to learn how this tradition began. We'll hear tales from Gobbler's Knob and learn the scientific relevance of one of America's oddest and most entertaining holidays. I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie, and you're listening to Off the Radar, a production of the National Weather Desk. On the show, we dig deep into topics about weather, climate, the ocean, space, and much more. Our goal is to help you better understand the weather and to love it as much as we do. Happy Groundhog Day, everyone. Welcome to Off the Radar. If you're a new listener, do me a favor. Thanks for checking us out, but please give us a follow on your favorite podcast platform. That way you'll be alerted of future episodes. So today I'm going to share an interview I did last year with Joe Murgo. Joe is the chief meteorologist at the TV station in Altoona, Pennsylvania. It's the home market to Punxsutawney, which means he covered this event year after year after year after year. Yeah, just like the movie. Well, not exactly like the movie. You'll see. Joe shares all of the inside details about what actually goes on up at Gobbler's Knob, and he has some hilarious mishaps that he has witnessed over the years. It's a very fun chat, and I wanted to share it with you leading up to the big day this weekend. Before we get to Joe, I am talking to 2 other former broadcast meteorologists, Bernadette Plackey and Shel Winkley. They both now work for a nonprofit group called Climate Central. I spent a lot of time with them both a couple of weeks ago at the annual meeting of the American Meteorological Society, and I wanted to get their take on Groundhog Day, both as former forecasters and current climate scientists. Take a listen. Welcome to Off the Radar. I have 2 not only colleagues, but also good friends with me today. So I'm super excited. There's this amazing community of former broadcast meteorologists, and these 2 are in it. I have Bernadette Plackey and Shel Winkley with me today. Thank you guys for coming on the show.
Yeah, happy to be here.
We are so excited to join you.
And I have seen you both recently because we were all in New Orleans last week for a very big conference that happens every January, the American Meteorological Society's annual meeting. Wait, how many people do you think were there? Do you guys have any idea?
The official numbers are in, and it was about 7,000 registered participants, the vast majority in person. There was a virtual component. I think it was 1,000 or less.
Of course you know that, Bernadette. Okay, and you guys were there doing some presentations too, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we really talked a lot about attribution science, kind of explaining what that is, how we've supported the media when it comes to their work on the communities they're working in, how attribution science really helps tell that story about climate change. And then Bernadette got to speak on a panel about Hurricane Helene, what we saw for 2024, and how the science really helps us understand this event and then events that could be coming, as we continue on into 2025 as well.
Yeah, it was an amazing panel. It was really interesting to hear perspectives from people that were in Asheville and then also from Bernadette about the attribution science and helping people better understand what that is. And I think, Shel, you and I maybe have some episodes coming up to talk about attribution science so people can understand it a little bit better too. But
should we give them a one-liner first, though, just so they can follow along? Attribution science is a branch of climate science where we can now go in and quantify the role of climate change within individual weather events. And so that's the broad summary. But as you said, you two are going to dive deeper into how people are calculating that, how it's being applied, and what we're learning.
Can you attribute the groundhog to any sort of scientific accuracy when it comes to forecasting whole seasons.
That is not something that we have broken through with yet. So we'll put it on the list.
Get cranking on that. We need more information. Okay, so as far as the AMS conference, I feel like there were several takeaways. Did anything stand out to you, Shel, as far as like, this was different this year, this was new, or you saw a theme of things happening?
A lot of the talks I sat in on, we were talking about communication, which I feel like is always a big conversation we have. But really, in what we saw in 2024 with the misinformation, it kind of really saturated social media and got us where it was harder to get that scientific message out, or even warnings and helpful information for people. And I think what I kept hearing that it kept coming back to is that local voice and a trusted voice. And those are really the ways that we're going to get the information that we need to get out, not just about climate change, but about extreme weather as well. Like, we really need to focus on that as we kind of watch the way that we consume our news and our media change. Like, those voices are still very important. My favorite quote of the entire conference was Ken Graham. He sat down and he said, how are we supposed to communicate with the next generation that isn't in 20 seconds while riding a skateboard, holding a fuzzy cat while Fleetwood Mac is playing? And I think the only thing he missed with that is that the next generation isn't listening to Fleetwood Mac. So maybe like while Sabrina Carpenter is playing. But I think that was a very good point. Like, how do we communicate with Gen Z and then the next generation beyond that to continue to get out the message about climate change and extreme weather?
For sure. Maybe the answer is podcasting. I mean, there's a lot of that, right? And then, what's interesting that stood out to me the moment of the conference, and Bernadette, this comes back to you, is this problem of communication and people, the message going out there. And it doesn't matter how good the forecast is, if people aren't getting that forecast and aren't learning what the hazards are and how to deal with them, it's pointless. And you leaned over and whispered at one point and said something to me about how important it is to have meteorologists and people who have this knowledge just be in the community, even if it's just like a community service effort that people like us are doing. It's connecting somebody who didn't know a meteorologist before with now a meteorologist, and they can hear real information and not just whatever they heard online. And that really stuck with me.
The real goal is trying to keep people safe and prepared, right? And so scientifically, we're advancing so rapidly and learning so much. That's great. But how do we get those scientific learnings to the right people in the right places in ways that matter? And there are communication techniques to do that. There are emergency management chains set up. But there's also this changing element of how we consume information, who we trust, and how to really break through that so that when something is happening, we can get the warning in a timely way to the right place and connect them with life-saving, not only information, but resources for during the event and after the event. And one of the things that's really great about the American Meteorological Society is its weather, water, and climate for the full enterprise, from the science all the way through to the practitioners on the ground doing that work, from emergency management and communicators and broadcasters. And this group really does come together and try to challenge where we can do better in these moments. The other thing, just to give people a sense of this conference, it is so broad and how weather and water and climate apply to life. There are sessions on health, energy, space weather. There's the climate modeling, the weather modeling, the water modeling, really technical advances to the policy and how that's playing out also in our changing DC landscape, to all the way down to technology and how people are consuming this information. So there's a whole lot of really cool stuff going on at this meeting. Some that is a little denser and some that is really in these big group conversations trying to challenge us to do better.
I would add to that, talking about technology. One of the biggest sessions I think I saw myself was around AI. That's been a topic that we've talked about a lot lately, but not just about how AI is going to change a meteorologist or a researcher's job and how we get our forecasts, but really how it can amplify things like better forecasts or better ways of getting information out. I think that was maybe the most energetic that I've seen a crowd just talking about that whole subject.
I think you guys made it to more sessions than I did.
Well, I always challenge myself to go to a couple that that are different for me. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the topic, how it's organized and who the presenters are, right? But there are ones that I'll go in and it opens new things in new ways. And that's the beauty of a conference like that is, and again, for people who don't go to this is this collection of, you've got hour-plus sessions, you've got deep dive workshops, but you also have these 15-minute sessions going on where people are just pumping out new research. So there's a whole lot of different stuff going on at once.
It's really overwhelming. And it was a really big conference center too. So sometimes she'd be walking a mile like between sessions quickly. So I often saw you guys like in passing.
My peak day was like 20,000 steps. I was like 1,000 steps off my record that I've ever gotten. So lots of walking, lots of learning.
I did 20,000 one day too. And I was like, I walked 10 miles today and I never left the convention center. It was a lot. All right, so let's talk about Groundhog Day because there's a lot of, I would say, controversy among the meteorologist crowd about this holiday. So first of all, I'm curious what you guys think. Do you have like a strong opinion? Do you hate Groundhog Day or are you kind of like, this is fun and silly?
I do have a strong opinion, but I'm going to let Bernadette go first.
I'll say I went to Penn State, so it's not far away, but it didn't really get this cultural appeal that it has now until after I was done at Penn State. So I wasn't part of the group that would go out there overnight and camp out. I kind of wish I was, but I wasn't.
You're kind of dating yourself now, like pre-movie, post-movie.
Exactly. I'm pre that Groundhog Day excitement. But I do have to say, though, I mean, it's eroded. It is. However, when there's opportunities to bring attention to weather, I don't know. Sometimes there's something fun about that and ways that we can communicate to people about how this relates to bigger things or different things that they're experiencing.
I'm a Phil loyalist. He is the prognosticator of all prognosticators. Like, you don't get that title just willy-nilly. Like, they don't give that to anybody, okay? That's all I'm saying.
I did not know that you were going that direction. I thought you were I definitely thought you were going the opposite direction.
I love him. In fact, when I was on TV,
you have a hat,
the hat and like the dress up and the pump. And the only thing is like, it is a little mean to just drag dude out of like his hole before, he has his cup of coffee and gets ready for the day. So like, I would be angry too. But overall, I love Groundhog Day. I love the movie. One of the reasons I wanted to become a broadcast meteorologist, when Bill Murray does the whole cold front where he blows, the cold front and moves on TV. I never did it, but I always wanted to do that move live on TV.
Oh.
We've got to get you to Punxsutawney.
I know. I've always wanted to go.
You've never been?
I've never been.
How about you, Emily?
I am a convert, I would say. I used to be of the, I thought like, okay, especially working morning news on Groundhog Day, I felt like everybody was paying so much more attention to this rodent than they were to my forecast. So it was a little bitter, but as time has gone on, I see it for what it is. And after talking to Joe Murgo, who we're going to hear from today on the show, I was converted. I was like, okay, you're right. He's bringing awareness to this is a change in seasons. People are celebrating weather. It's fun. And also something he pointed out is like, what does early spring mean? Like, that's such not a definite term. So the whole thing of like saying it's right or wrong, there really is no right or wrong because he's not saying the temperatures are going to be an average of 45 or above between this day and this day. He's saying early spring or, winter continues.
I would have to say that's the thing, Emily, that I would probably come across differently than other people is I wouldn't necessarily cheer an early spring. I like snow. I like winter. So I don't understand why that is the common assumption that that's good to have an early spring. That's where I think I differ from some people.
Okay.
But I'm here for the party.
I co-sign that though, because I'm in Texas. And so like anytime he's like early spring, I was like, it's been spring for the past 5 months. I want some winter.
Right.
So I'll co-sign that. I like him when he dives back into his hole.
So, okay, that segues into the fact that I want to hear, you guys are experts on this, the changing climate. Is there, first of all, any information you can tell me about Punxsutawney when it comes to climate? Because this has been going on since 1887. And so I want to know, does Phil know about climate change? And has the climate been changing in this one location? Do we know?
Yeah. So we know that, Phil, he doesn't usually predict early spring. So I went back and I dug through all the data. Just since 1970, 16 times is how often he has predicted an early spring. The most recent was last year and then in 2020. And then between 1897 in 1970, he only predicted 5 early springs. So like in terms of his predictions, Phil normally leans towards winter, but we did some analysis and we saw that 93% of the cities we analyzed, so it's 244 cities, within the 6 weeks that Phil was supposedly prognosticating for, right? 93% of those have seen a warming trend in that 6-week period. So when you look at the climate science, even if he's saying that, winter might be sticking around, the trend is that spring is just becoming earlier and earlier for most of our US cities.
Well, that's kind of sad. Okay, so what do you think for this year, guys? Any predictions?
All right, here's my one flaw with Punxsutawney. There's a lot of lights, right? Like they put a lot of lights around them so you can have cameras and so everyone can see them. So like, does that skew Phil's shadow?
This is why they don't let us scientists anywhere near there on February 2nd.
People cheer, they party and have fun.
They don't want us ruining the fun. Okay, Bernadette, do you have any predictions?
I'm hoping that we continue in winter because I live in New Jersey and we did finally get a little bit of snow in this last storm. We had sleet mix in, so it really limited our snow mounts to like 2.5, maybe 3 inches. And we're in a pattern that we could get some good snow. And I just hope for that one big snowstorm. So I'm hoping we get that out of Phil's forecast.
Well, we'll see. And, I'm like staring at the radar waiting for snow to start here in Charleston, South Carolina. So no sign of spring here yet for sure. Shel Winkley, Bernadette Woods-Plackney, do you have anything else you want to add about Groundhog Day or the AMS annual meeting before I let you go?
I would say had a blast at AMS and give Phil a break. He's trying with the best of us. Again, climate change is a thing. Like he's trying to do the best job that he can. That's all.
Use it as an opportunity to learn something about the weather and our changing climate. And for anyone interested in the AMS, there is a weather enthusiast portion that you can get involved in called Weather Band right now. And it's going to be evolving a little bit, but Weather Band gives you an opportunity to learn more if you are interested in weather.
Cool. Yeah, they have some great webinars and educational material. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. And for anybody who's not already a fan of Punxsutawney Phil, you will be after hearing from Joe Murgo. We're going to hear from him next. He's going to tell us about the history of Groundhog Day, the scientific significance, and he's been there every year himself for like over 20 years. I can't wait to hear from him on what his experiences are like. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Emily.
Joe Murgo, I'm so happy to have you on today because you are not only a former broadcast meteorologist, but somebody who covered an event like nobody else. You are like the original, what's the guy's name from Groundhog Day?
Yes.
Phil Connors. Okay, yes. You are the original Phil Connors in a real life kind of way. So let's talk about Groundhog Day and kind of the weather implications, the science implications, but I want to start by asking you a little bit about your history with Groundhog Day and how long you covered it and what that was like.
My first year covering it was back in 2002, and I have a streak that continues to go on. So even during COVID, they closed it off, but I've been there. I have, it's impossible. I have the longest streak of covering it on the media. And yes, I'll still be there this year.
Okay, so what's it like? Because we have our preconceived notions, like the movie tells us one thing. Recent years, you see it on TV and it looks like a giant raging party early in the morning. So what is it? What's going on there?
What it is it's nothing like the movie at all. In the movie, he's in this bed and breakfast. He just goes out to a little park downtown and then that's it. So Gobbler's Knob is a couple of miles south of Punxsutawney. You have, in the old days, it really was a free-for-all party. Then when 2001 hit, 9/11, after that, they slowly started building in more security. Now, you can't get up there until 2 a.m. And you have to take a bus from downtown Punxsutawney unless you have a special access. And so the crowd usually is downtown and they have different places you could stay, and then they work their way on the bus. And people are there all morning long, just in the cold, dancing, watching the entertainment. And it is a pretty big party, though. Nowadays, I'm sure there's some let's say, substances of liquid there. I don't really get to see
Gotta
it, but
stay
I don't
warm.
get to poop around the crowd much. But it definitely has changed. And there's family sections and there's fires for people to warm up. And it's just a nice atmosphere. I tell everyone it's something you gotta do at least once. You've never been yet, have you?
I haven't, but I've also heard people say that about New Year's Eve in Times Square, and I have no desire to do that. Are there bathrooms?
Yes,
Okay.
there are. In fact,
Always
there's
a concern.
for most people, it's just line of porta potties, but there's plenty. They have amenities. They have first aid. They have security. So there are. You're not out in the middle of the woods in the middle of nowhere. You don't have to rely on Depends like you do in New Year's. Where
Right.
I mean, yeah, you can get to the spots. Now, I will say I limit my water consumption early in the day because once I'm in position at 3 a.m, I'm usually in that position till about 9. No bathroom breaks, nothing. I'm usually one station, another station, and just constantly doing updates.
So how do you prepare? You say you dehydrate for one. Like, do you have hand warmers? How do you dress?
The biggest thing is you do have to make sure you dress appropriately because if it's a cold morning, that cold gets to you. No matter what, I'm a skier, so I have plenty of gear, but the cold will get to you. And I've seen several professional broadcasters, even nationwide, and that they look drunk at the end. They're not drunk. It's just the cold is slowing down their processes a good bit. And that's the biggest thing. And you just have to dress appropriately. Now, if you show up too close to the end, you're way in the back.
So if you've been doing this for 20 years, I'm sure you've seen lots of different types of weather on Groundhog Day. Any extremes that stand out to you?
There were a couple of really cold ones in the early 2000s. And then, and ironically, it was one time that my whole family decided to go. The worst is when there's a little bit of rain and it's cold. That's the worst kind of weather. But recently, it's been pretty mild. Now, I will say my gear gets better year to year. I'm pretty comfortable, but there's been a couple of years ago, I remember I had to strip some layers. It was that mild. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so take me through the process itself of the groundhog seeing its shadow. Are we still relying on that? I'm curious about kind of the history and when things transition to there's like a scroll and who are the guys in the top hats? Explain it all to me.
Well, it all started in the 1800s in Pennsylvania. And even before then, I'll even back up even before then, it was a German tradition over in Europe. And they used to use a hibernating hedgehog. Well, when the Germans migrated to Pennsylvania, we had a high German population. So what they did is, well, we don't have hedgehogs here. They found a groundhog similar enough. And in the late 1800s, they came out for the first time. And every year since then, and the tradition really didn't grow that much until the movie. And that's where you went from, it grew to maybe hundreds to absolute thousands there. But the scrolls, that's been going on for a long time. And what Phil proclaims is he actually speaks in groundhogese.
Oh, I'm not fluent. Tell me more.
Yes, he only speaks that language, and only the president who's holding the cane. And if you notice, they rap on his stump before they bring him up. And holding that cane can understand groundhogese, and he picks one of two scrolls, one that says that he sees the shadow, one that says he doesn't. And, Phil has always been there ever since the 1800s.
Wow, Phil is old.
Yes, he drinks a magical elixir every July. That's how he stays young, Phil and Phyllis.
Gonna need that recipe.
Same here. And I do want to get this out because you're probably going to hear it. He's treated pretty well. A lot of people will sit there and go, that's so mean to Groundhog. Well, first of all, he is a lot more comfortable than I am on Groundhog Day. And I'm right in front of his stump, seeing his little light and heat on the inside of his stump, and I'm outside in the cold. But they treat him so nice. He has a habitat in the library. That's his home, and with him and Phyllis, and it's a museum there, and they do treat him pretty nice.
I have not heard concerns about that, but maybe it's just the circles I run in.
I do, however, run in the circles of meteorologists that are like angry about Groundhog Day. They're angry that anybody puts any stock in a groundhog for a seasonal forecast. So you've kind of always spoken on the opposite side of things. I'm like, this is a fun tradition. So can you address that, the people that are very critical of Phil?
Well, first of all, I am first and foremost science. I still teach meteorology for one of the campuses at Penn State. I am science true and true. I now work in the climate and weather risk field. First of all, who is totally putting all their stock in on what this one tradition is? Second of all, why do I celebrate it? Well, first of all, I also am one of those people who don't like the darkness. And, and seasonal affective disorder is a big issue. You know what the interesting thing about Groundhog Day and why they picked that date? It is the midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. So that means you're now getting into that period where the day length really strengthens. It is a turning of the seasons, and that is a very important date to me when it comes to daylight, and that it just have a significance there where they picked that day.
Yeah, you're right. Because, I grew up in Connecticut and the winter felt very never ending. And Groundhog Day was always kind of like this day of hope, regardless of what the outcome was. It was like this day of hope where we had something all of a sudden to look forward to, because that time between, January 1 and February 1 is kind of like a bleak time, and it makes us think, okay, spring is right around the corner. Either way, it's going to happen this year. It's just a little bit longer. That's a really good point.
It's the Super Bowl of weather. You get the whole world interested in weather on a day.
And in a good way, not in like a traumatic hurricane or snowstorm kind of way.
Yes. And so to me, it's a celebration day, more of celebrating weather and the changing seasons, and less about the actual message.
Speaking of the outcome, what's Phil's accuracy like? Do you have any numbers for me on like how he actually does, or is there any concrete evidence on that?
So Phil's accuracy, it's a never lose forecast. 6 more weeks of winter, no definition of winter, and spring right around the corner. So how can you ever prove him wrong? It really is a loose definition. So in the court of law, could you argue that Phil is 100% correct? Yes, because there is no true definition of winter. There's no true definition of spring, because really spring is just a battle between winter and summer, and eventually summer will win no matter how miserable it is.
So even if there isn't like scientific accuracy in Groundhog Day, is there scientific relevance kind of beyond this whole, it's the halfway point here in the season? Is there any other scientific relevancy here?
Well, yes. Often you're talking about a long wave trough or ridge that locks in for about 4 or 6 weeks at a time. At the midway point, if the weather is clear, most likely, and mild, most likely you're in a ridge. So he would see his shadow. And therefore, given the length of when cold air can hold on, odds are the pattern will change again, and it will still feel harsh winter-like, and there's still significant cold. However, if you're locked in that trough, odds are it is going to warm up sometime, and then, maybe less than a month. By the time it would go back again into that long wave trough, the amount of cold air is gone, and the sun's getting too strong. So there is a little scientific, if you think about it and break it down to the overall weather pattern. Because you think about it, in winter, you don't usually go lock in. You go from a cold pattern to a warm pattern, there are some long wave shifts.
Okay, Punxsutawney, a lot of people don't even know where this is. And I mean, if you grew up in, say, California, this may be completely irrelevant to you. You don't even know where this is. So can you explain like where in Pennsylvania this is, and then your TV market, and just how small that is, and how it was like the hometown TV market for this city?
Yes. Yeah, I worked in the Altoona, Johnstown television market, which includes Jefferson County, where Punxsutawney is located. It is about an hour northwest of Altoona and about an hour and a half northeast of Pittsburgh. Off the beaten path. There's no major interstate there, and that's why it's really important to the town. And this is a big boost to their economy every year. So, it's real important to this small little town, but it is in the middle of nowhere. And it's even outside of that town, too. It's kind of hysterical. So, the Altoona Johnstown market is the home market for Phil. And that's how I got to cover it for all those years.
Okay, so 20 plus years. We've talked about kind of the weather you've seen in that time. Anything else that you've seen? Any weird things happen or crazy things happen that stand out to you? Some fun memories of covering this for over 2 decades?
Let me think of all the ones that are safe to say.
You can tell me the unsafe ones too. I'll cut them out if they're too inappropriate.
Well, there was one governor. Phil Groundhog have very sharp teeth, and he's not it's not a domestic animal. Phil does have changing moods. One governor, they warned and they said, whatever you do, governor, don't try to pet the groundhog. And the first thing that he did when he got up on stage, he reached out for it. And thank goodness, I think Bill Dealey was the handler at that time. Thank goodness his reflexes were fast enough, because the governor almost lost a finger that day. A lot of times you'll see them handling him with black gloves, and there's fencer steel mesh gloves underneath. So this, the teeth are very sharp. There's another time that they lifted Phil up, and they always hold him up and do this to the crowd. There was one time he had to go.
Oh.
And actually, they didn't turn in front of me, but he did shower once.
Oh, no. They got wet? They got peed on?
Some people got peed on. And
that's not what you want on a cold day.
No, it's not what you want even on a warm day. And another time, Phil almost got away, and it was just it was a tense moment, because he slipped and he fell, and his mouth went to the area on the handler's body where you're hoping someone doesn't take a bite. Yes.
Has the crowd ever done anything weird? Has there ever been fights?
Absolutely. There's always, now one time there was someone from an MTV show that was there. It was Viva La Bam. He was going to storm the stage, and it was interesting because of the maneuvering, how everyone heard it and was trying to prevent that. There was one time this woman came in just a fur bikini. Some of the outfits that people wear. I mean, there's a guy, he has a different groundhog beanie baby he adds to his hat every year. It's very interesting. And you see people from everywhere. I've run into, you mentioned California, it doesn't mean much, but I've run into people from Japan, Australia, Hawaiians. It's like a bucket list. I even one time interviewed and talked to a South African.
They must think, what a strange American tradition.
Yes. And it's interesting because he does get his picture, because I'll know, because people will see it. And it's in newspapers all around the world. Joe gets his proclamation. And especially if it's a really rough weather pattern around the time, he tends to get even more headlines.
What can you tell me about the inner circle? How do you get in the inner circle? Are women allowed? It seems kind of elite.
It is. There have been conversations. To be honest, I've met a lot of the women family of the inner circle, and they're like, "That's okay. We don't want to stay up all night anyway," because they work constantly. It's a group of people who their responsibility is to carry on tradition, and it's a 365-day a year job. It is, you do have to work your way in, and it requires a certain amount of volunteer hours, and then they'll retire and they still are part of it. But it is a small club. I'm I was so honored the one time. I'm an honorary member of the Inner Circle.
I was going to ask, do you have any aspirations to be in the Inner Circle given your history?
Not the full Inner Circle. I'm just happy enough to be an honorary member. And, and I will tell you, I love those guys. Those guys are great. They really do a lot. And the Governor Shapiro, came last year, right after he was elected to office, and he and his family loved the tradition. And they just brought the Inner Circle, and they invited me, and we all went to the governor's mansion 100 days before Groundhog Day, and we had a celebration. And Phil was there too.
Are there a lot of pregame events?
There are people who go there every day of the year just to see it. When you walk around Punxsutawney, there's all these small little groundhogs all over the place. Well, small. They're about 4 or 5 foot tall statues all over town. So people go there all the time and maybe not even go for the day itself. But some people will go up 2-3 days ahead of time and will stay. And good luck in getting a hotel room around there. It's interesting because Punxsutawney doesn't have much in the way of lodging. I was really lucky for the longest time because they allowed me. I say no one's up at Gobbler's Knob, but for a while, for about a half dozen years, I would have an RV in the back and I would sleep on Gobbler's Knob.
Oh, wow.
With my crew, yes.
How convenient.
It's so interesting because I would go to sleep and it's all empty patch of woods, and you wake up and there's tens of thousands of people.
Yeah. Joe, is there anything else you want to add about Groundhog Day? This has been really fun.
No, just again, it's worth it for someone to go once. It's a fun thing. Do it once, but just have a great attitude and prepare for the cold.
Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes published every Tuesday. We'd also love you to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Thank you to Joe Murgo, Shel Winkley, and Bernadette Woods-Plackey for being on the show today. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or you want to give me an idea for future episodes, find me on social media. Just search Emily Gracie Weather on any platform, including Blue Sky, which I just joined. I also want to thank my associate producer, Brian Petrus, for his help on this episode, and to Sinclair Broadcast Group for their ongoing support. I'm prognosticator Emily Gracie. Make it a great day.